If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths, and sometimes heights, to ensure the power is always flowing. Which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. Welcome to True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. Now, I just did an episode on Hunter Biden, and we dove into the shocking presidential pardon, a move that left many Americans questioning the fairness of our justice system. In this episode, I'm going to pick up where we left off with new developments that have only deepened this controversy. Now, imagine this. You are watching a justice system that's supposed to be fair and impartial, but then a single action, one pardon, throws everything into chaos. People are outraged, debates are raging, and even the special counsel who built the case against Hunter is speaking out. This is happening right now before all of us. And what does this mean for justice in America? And how does this pardon compare to others we've seen in history? This is more than just a legal story, guys. This is a story about trust and power and the questions that define a democracy and public opinion. So stay with me as we unravel the latest twists in this unprecedented case and explore whether the pardon of Hunter Biden is justice served or justice denied. When President Biden issued a full pardon for his son Hunter, it wasn't just a legal maneuver. It became an instant public spectacle, and we all saw it. The pardon covered years of federal tax and gun-related offenses, wiping the slate clean for a man who had already been convicted and who had put his own evidence out there in front of all of us. For many Americans, this action struck at the heart of what the justice system is supposed to represent: fairness, impartiality, and accountability. But what happens when the public begins to lose faith in those ideals? The reaction to this pardon has been swift and divided. On one side, there's outrage, an overwhelming sense that this is a gross misuse of presidential power, a move that would never happen for the average citizen. On the other, there's a defense of the pardon, with supporters arguing that Hunter was unfairly targeted because of his connection to the president. As the nation watches, one question looms large. Can public opinion influence how we see justice in America? If the public overwhelmingly believes that this pardon is unfair, does that perception change the legacy of the Biden administration? Or does it highlight something deeper, an erosion of trust in a system that many already feel is broken? The public is not just an observer in this story. They're a participant. The outrage, the debates, and the demands for fairness are shaping how this case will be remembered. And as the controversy unfolds, it raises a critical question. When the people feel justice has not been served, can their voice make a difference? Or are they powerless to stop what many see as an abuse of power and privilege? One of the most unsettling aspects of this case for many Americans is the sheer amount of evidence already in the public domain. I mean, unlike many legal battles that unfold behind closed doors, Hunter Biden's actions have been on full display for all of us to see. Photographs, videos, financial records, and even admissions from Hunter himself have painted a damning picture. This isn't a case of conflicting narratives or ambiguous facts. The evidence is there for everyone to see. the facts have already been made available for everyone. Hunter's publicized struggles with addiction, coupled with his documented possession of a firearm while using illegal substances, form the basis of charges that are extremely clear-cut under federal law. For many, it's not just the pardon that feels unfair here. It is the idea that someone with this level of documented guilt can just walk away without facing the same consequences or any consequences as countless others who committed similar crimes. The public sees the evidence and asks, if this isn't enough for the justice system to act impartially, what is? This transparency, ironically, has only fueled the outrage. The public isn't left guessing. They are watching the same evidence that prosecutors presented. And yet, despite its clarity, the system appears to have bent under the weight of Hunter Biden's last name. For families who've seen loved ones face years in prison for far less, this pardon feels like a personal betrayal. A betrayal of the promise that justice is blind. As public discussions intensify across blogs and podcasts and social media, a question begins to take shape. Could this case spark a broader movement? In other high-profile instances of perceived justice, we've seen public outcry turn into protests and petitions and even policy changes. Could this pardon and the outrage it has sparked become a tipping point? Or will it remain just another case where public opinion boils over online but fails to create any lasting change? President Biden's decision to pardon his son has definitely started a wave of questions about fairness and accountability. Because everyone was hit with all the evidence, seems like pretty much everyone's talking. But the ripple effects go far beyond the legal ramifications that we're all looking at. For many Americans, this pardon, it really does feel like a breaking point in their perception of justice. It's not just about Hunter. It's about what this decision represents for a nation already skeptical of a system that seems to favor the powerful over the powerless. The facts of the case leave little room for ambiguity. Hunter Biden was convicted of lying on a federal form to purchase a firearm and to pay over $1.4 million in taxes between 2016 and 2019. These are serious charges, and the evidence is undeniable. But with one single signature, President Biden erased these convictions, citing claims of unfair targeting by prosecutors. And he was cleared. This pardon goes all the way back, like 10 years for anything. And I think it's also supposed to protect him from any convictions in the future. Pretty crazy. Critics, including special counsel David Weiss, have dismissed this defense, stating the charges were based on clear evidence and probable cause. This pardon has left many wondering, if this were anyone else, any ordinary American, would they have received the same leniency? For families of incarcerated individuals who faced similar or even lesser charges, this pardon brings up that feeling of betrayal. It's not just Hunter who was pardoned. It's the principle of equality under the law that seems to have been completely dismissed. And what happens next remains unclear. But the public's role in shaping the narrative is undeniable. As more people engage in discussions, online and offline, comparisons to other cases emerge. Would this kind of pardon provoke protests, as seen in past high-profile cases? Or will the public's frustration remain confined to blogs and podcasts and social media, unable to influence tangible change? I mean, the potential for action is there, but the question is whether the outrage will grow loud enough to make a difference. And if the public does decide to press, which way will they choose? If they choose protest, is that really the best option? And overall, does the public even have a chance? The announcement of President Biden's pardon for Hunter Biden did shock the nation, not only because of the familial connection, but also due to the sweeping nature of the pardon itself. Because, again, this wasn't a partial pardon or a symbolic gesture. This was full and unconditional, something we don't see often. It covers all federal charges from January 1st of 2014 to December 1st of 2024. The pardon effectively wiped away convictions related to tax evasion and gun possession, leaves Hunter a free man in the eyes of the law. Critics were quick to point out the extraordinary nature of this decision. Presidential pardons are not uncommon, but they're typically reserved for cases where the justice system is believed to have failed or where rehabilitation has been demonstrated. In Hunter's case, the evidence was clear and it was damning. His own financial records revealed over $1.4 million in unpaid taxes, and his possession of a firearm while actively using illegal drugs. I mean, all of this directly violates federal law, and it's clear and it's out there for everyone to see, and under Hunter's own admission. These are not murky accusations. These were convictions based on undeniable evidence. The timing of the pardon, it also raises eyebrows. I mean, with Hunter facing ongoing legal battles in both California and Delaware, the pardon preempted further consequences. It stops everything, essentially shielding him from the fallout of his actions. For many, this move seemed less about justice and more about protecting the Biden family's reputation, reinforcing perceptions of a two-tiered justice system. Adding fuel to this fire, special counsel David Weiss, who led the investigation into Hunter, publicly refuted claims that the charges were politically motivated. Weiss is a Trump-appointed prosecutor, obviously Biden's opponent. Still a judge, emphasizes that the charges were based on strong evidence and probable cause. And again, the evidence is already out there. And that is why this judge is emphasizing that these allegations of unfair targeting be dismissed. His statement directly contradicted the White House's defense, and it further complicates the narrative. But we need to be aware, if this is unfair political targeting, we need to see the evidence on that side as well, because we have all the evidence on the conviction side. I would have to ask this question. But now, Weiss's response was seen by many as a rare moment of actual transparency within a highly politicized case. Okay, because the public's talking, but we don't usually see this kind of action or commenting or injections from someone at this level when it's against something this big. By standing firm on the legitimacy of the charges, he challenges the president's justification for this pardon, and it raises critical questions about the intersection of politics and justice. Was this pardon a reflection of systemic fairness, as the White House claimed, or is it a glaring example of power shielding privilege? The public reaction to Weiss's statement has also been intense. For those already skeptical of the pardon, it reinforces their belief that justice was subverted. For others, it highlighted the broader issue of how political influence can erode trust in the legal system. This statement wasn't just about Hunter Biden. This was a declaration about the integrity of the process itself. And it leaves the public to wonder if the truth still holds weight in the face of power. In the wake of mounting criticism, the White House issued a statement defending President Biden's decision to pardon his son. Press Secretary argued that Hunter Biden had been unfairly targeted due to his father's political position. She referred to the pardon as a necessary response to war politics, suggesting that the legal actions against Hunter were fueled by partisan movements rather than genuine concerns about justice. While the White House's defense sought to frame the pardon as an act of fairness, many found it unconvincing. And partly this is because there is so much evidence that is in our face on the guilty side. What actually is on the targeting side? Can we see that evidence? What has happened to convince the president that this is what is going on? And critics pointed out that Hunter's offenses, they're not abstract. Everyone's talking about it. They are not unsubstantiated. These are clear violations of federal law, supported by public evidence all over the place. Maybe it's being deleted on Google right now. I'm not sure, but it is out there and has been for quite a long time. The defense also sidestepped the issue of timing, failing to address why the pardon was issued before Hunter had completed the legal process for all of his charges. For many Americans, this explanation felt like a deflection rather than justification. The phrase war politics, what is that? Where's this evidence? It became a lightning rod for criticism, with commentators arguing that it minimized the gravity of Hunter's crimes. Instead of calming the outrage, basically this statement seemed to pour fuel on the fire, sparking debates about whether the president had placed family loyalty above his commitment to impartial justice. And while there are some defenders of the president's decision, the overwhelming sentiment is one of disbelief and frustration. How could such a high-profile case with so much evidence out there in plain view end with a pardon that seems to just dismiss all accountability? This growing discontent raises a fundamental question. What power does public opinion hold in shaping the outcome of a case like this? In the past, we've seen how public outrage can lead to protests and legislative changes and even shifts in political strategy. Could something like that happen here? Or is this case just going to join the long list of controversies that capture the public's attention briefly for a moment while the media keeps it there, but then it ultimately fades away without any lasting impact as our attentions turn to the next media focus? Well, the answer may lie in how the public chooses to act or not act. While frustration and anger are palpable, tangible actions like petitions and organized protests or pressure on lawmakers have yet to materialize. This moment feels pivotal. Will the public's dissatisfaction find a voice loud enough to demand change, or will the outrage remain confined to online forums, fleeting headlines, and discussions like this? Only time will tell. Let's explore a little bit of the bigger picture in this. Hunter Biden's pardon is not just an isolated controversy, right? This is a part of a larger pattern that's feeding public frustration with the justice system. Across the country, high-profile cases are dragging on for years, leaving the public with a sense that accountability is either delayed or just denied. Cases like the Menendez brothers, where advocates argue that new evidence could exonerate them, highlight a system that often seems slow to adapt to evolving truths. And come on, people, as a public group, we all know that once the court decides something, they don't like to admit that they are wrong. So we don't really get that relief or resolve because they just don't want to do it. Now, for many here, the Hunter Biden case feels like a tipping point. It's not just about this one man avoiding consequences. It's about what his pardon symbolizes. When justice appears to bend for the powerful, while ordinary people face harsh penalties for lesser offenses, it feeds the perception of a two-tier justice system. This perception is not new, but with social media amplifying voices, it's louder than ever. The frustration isn't confined to this case alone either. Stories of unfair sentencing, systemic delays, and perceived favoritism in other cases have created an environment where trust in the system is at an all-time low. While there's no sign of widespread protests yet, the underlying discontent in the justice system is undeniable, and the public is beginning to ask, if the justice system cannot deliver fairness, what can? The power of public opinion has always been a double-edged sword. On one hand, it has driven meaningful change, from the civil rights movement to recent shifts in criminal justice reform. But on the other hand, when outrage is left unchecked, it can lead to chaos and unintended consequences. In the case of Hunter Biden, the public's voice is growing louder, but its direction remains unclear. Will this outrage translate into action, like organized call for transparency or demands for reform? Or will it remain a storm of online discussions and podcasts like this, dissipating before it can make a tangible impact? While this moment feels pivotal, is not just because of Hunter's pardon, but because it seems like a litmus test for how much public opinion truly does matter in shaping justice and accountability. Yet what is true and what we have to admit is public opinion can only be as loud as the media allows it to be. In a world where narratives are crafted and amplified by powerful platforms, the media holds the reins on how far outrage can travel. So will the media support the public's calls for justice, highlighting the apparent unfairness of this pardon? Or is the media, your news and mine, going to shield the administration? Another layer of shielding, muting public dissent and controlling the narrative to favor those in power. And this raises an even larger question, guys. How much of public opinion is really genuine? How much is shaped by what the media chooses to report or chooses to bury? We think our thoughts are our own. If the media doesn't amplify the public's voice, how can frustration and outrage translate into meaningful action? Can a movement for change even begin if it lacks the platform to be heard? People are calling out against this pardon. It's going to be interesting to see how the media handles that. We've already seen the press secretary say, oh, that's not it. No, it's really this. Is the public opinion going to get buried? The public is watching, and not just to see how Hunter's case unfolds, but to see whether their voices are still relevant in a system where information is filtered through the lens of corporate and political interests. Perhaps this is where the fight must start. Not in the streets in a protest, but in demanding a media landscape that represents the truth, the facts, and the people's voice, rather than trying to steer the people into some other direction, some other voice, supporting something they may not even be aware of. This happens on a daily basis. And speaking of daily, what is happening right now? Well, as of today, the fallout from Hunter Biden's pardon continues to send shockwaves through the nation. The public's frustration is palpable, but what's even more significant is that this time it's not just the people speaking out, it's the judiciary. A federal judge, in a rare and bold move, has questioned the legitimacy of this pardon. And this isn't just a passing remark, it is a formal statement that challenges the appropriateness and legality of a decision made by the highest office in the land. Judges rarely engage in public commentary on political matters, especially, making this intervention all the more striking. It's a reflection of just how extraordinary and controversial this pardon is. The judge's concerns align with those of many Americans who see this as a glaring example of the justice system bending under the weight of political influence. This alignment between public sentiment and judicial authority is rare, and potentially powerful. The judge's statement is more than symbolic. It sparked a flurry of speculation about what might come next. Could this lead to formal legal challenges against the pardon itself? While presidential pardons are often considered untouchable, the sheer weight of public and judicial scrutiny here might open a few doors. Legal scholars are already debating whether the scope of this pardon, which shields Hunter from a broad range of federal charges, could be deemed excessive or even unconstitutional. Now, if that happens, it would mark an unprecedented moment in American history, one where a president's pardon is not only questioned, but potentially overturned. But as significant as the judge's voice is, it also raises a critical question. Will this momentum be enough to sustain real accountability? Will it? Seems like a big deal. Is it? Public outrage is loud, but it's often fleeting and it's often shut down. The judge's concerns might serve as a rallying point, but without consistent pressure, there is a risk that this case could fade into the background and become just another chapter in a long book of controversies. And the public, when they hear that he's getting pardoned, they sort of accept it even though they're outraged, because the public feels as though there's nothing they can do. But now with this judge stepping in, maybe the public voice has a chance here against even something this big. And that gives people hope. But again, we need the momentum. The media's role in this moment cannot be overstated. Will they amplify the judge's words and give this story the scrutiny it deserves? Or will they focus on deflecting attention away from it, allowing the administration to ride out the storm, and letting the public just accept it like they always seem to have to? These questions hang heavy in the air as the nation watches what feels like a pivotal test, not just for the justice system, but for democracy itself. Okay, now let's take a look at how this could go. So what if public opinion and the judge's voice is actually heard? Okay, if the voices of public outrage and the judge's objections are amplified, this case could mark a turning point in how presidential pardons are perceived and potentially challenged. Now, historically, pardons have been nearly untouchable, seen as a president's unquestioned prerogative. But this case, with its broad scope and undeniable controversy, has pushed boundaries in ways that the public and even legal scholars are struggling to accept. Now imagine what could happen if public opinion becomes a force powerful enough to demand transparency. Organized petitions and consistent public pressure could compel lawmakers to propose legislation that redefines the limits of presidential pardon powers. Legal challenges fueled by public sentiment and the judge's statements could force the courts to examine whether this pardon was in fact an overreach, potentially setting a precedent for greater accountability in the future. More importantly, a sustained public outcry could spark broader discussions about fairness in the justice system. If the nation demands clarity and consistency in how justice is applied, whether to the powerful or the powerless, it could lead to systemic reforms. This moment could inspire a renewed push for laws that ensure equal accountability, sending a clear message that no one is above the law. But none of this can happen without the public staying informed. As the judge's voice echoes throughout legal debates, the public's role to amplify it, not with unchecked emotions or misinformation, but with a commitment to understanding the actual facts. If the public acts wisely, their voice can become more than just noise. It can become a catalyst for real change. But again, the public, like the judge, needs to know actual facts. The public can't just listen to one line in the news and call it a day. Because as we know, the media directs, They're not always concerned in the facts. And that's the only way the public can make a difference. Now, what if the public is not heard and the judge is ignored? What if this outrage just fizzles out? If public opinion fails to maintain momentum, the pardon may become yet another example of perceived injustice that is now swept under the rug. Without sustained attention, the judge's objections could be dismissed as symbolic rather than consequential. The legal challenges that could emerge might falter without the backing of public interest, and the administration could weather this storm unscathed by meaningful consequences, and Hunter will just go on a free man, even with all that evidence just sitting right there. This risk is twofold. First, a lack of public action could embolden future administrations to issue similarly controversial pardons with no fear of accountability, setting criminals free, letting go whoever they want, for whatever reason, no matter the evidence. Second, it could deepen the already widespread distrust in the justice system, further eroding the belief that fairness and equality are attainable. This is a dangerous precedent, one that sends the message that power and privilege matter more than evidence or accountability. And for the public, this outcome would be a sobering reminder that inaction has consequences, and they could become permanent, where public opinion doesn't matter at all. Outrage without follow-through becomes little more than background noise. People screaming, making noise, and it's quickly replaced by the next controversy that, of course, the media will give you. And then what happens? The opportunity for change, however slim it may have seemed or was, it is now gone. This Hunter Biden pardon is not just a legal story. It's a test of how much the public's voice matters in shaping justice and democracy in a country where they think their voice matters, right? As this case unfolds, remember that staying informed is the first and most important step. If you care about this, you cannot rely on a single news outlet or social media post to shape your perspective. One needs to seek out the actual facts, examine multiple sources, challenge yourself to think critically. You want to have an opinion, and your voice matters, but only if it's rooted in the truth does it have value. Whether it's through sharing information, engaging in constructive discussions, or supporting calls for transparency. Your role in this story is vital. Justice is not just about what happens in the courtrooms. It's about the conversations we all have and the actions we take and the accountability we demand. And the Hunter Biden case continues. Thank you for joining me here in True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. Stay safe out there, guys. Stay curious and stay informed of the facts. And until next time, this is Alexis Knight.